The wizard was so disappointed when he had to explain that, yes, he was taking the boys to a brothel on the outskirts, but they weren't going to like it as much as they thought. It wasn't a night of whoring in store. They had been so happy and excited before he had actually finished the sentence. Oh, and how damn naive we had been, thought Aziz. All the difference between we're going to a brothel and we're going to a brothel, someone left a dead girl in the lobby. The wizard paused and stopped the two boys from following, glaring at the waiting stairs to the third level, stating,
"Hold now, lads. We'll determine our way about our business. Let this here beastie think he's made us welcome."
Taking state of the two new bodies on the second floor of this house of ill state. Its reputation long vacated from these walls. It smelled organically offensive in this place, the evil opposite to the smell of fresh-cut grass. Unrepentantly corrosive and wrought of some ill-conceived corruption of natural fecundity that mankind's nose was made to detect, so he may trace it to its source and burn it down. The wizard grumbled and pulled delicately at the girls with his cane. They had been sky-clad, yet prepared bodies enmeshed, seemingly some garment made from improvisation, and the material from the thinner fishing nets, ornate with mother-of-pearl and beads. They were painted, their faces painted, and they had been wearing masks. The left eyebrow of the wizard raised, as did the right eyebrow and nostril of his ivory pipe, both perplexed. This was not the same cult as he had last dealt with. These were ladies who had been far more well educated, but far less prepared, dangerous. Their positions left little to the imagination, all splayed and drawn out, with the ruin and viscera left in trails, explaining exactly from what nether these horrors had entered the world. The masks had been pulled off, faces exposed on these two practitioners, that the creatures came in pairs, as trails had come from the mouths as well, bloody, and both covered in a thick, silt-filled exoplasm of some type. Grotesque, and it was red and had hardened into a type of resin. The vulgar ruckus reported must have been the birth, the completion of a ritual that the wizard suspected had perhaps been coerced in some manner, promises being made on behalf of something that rarely ever truly communed. This was foul. The boys had begun to creep about nearer to where the beast had gone, up to the third floor. The wizard told them to remain close to him. Tani came close by, eyeing the dark corners of the room, though indeed the commotion of the house was upstairs. They had needed to check the bodies. The girl on the first floor seemed to have either split or slit her belly and tried to tear out and wrangle her horrific progeny. And the wizard, continuing to mutter, put forth the immensely uncomfortable idea. Perhaps these women had been taken, for unaware as to what would happen to them. Fertility, yes, but of what matter? What substance? This was all becoming very grim indeed, dire even, and would require them to return to the magistrate. The wizard had recognized the markings and symbols, and the fact that the bodies that had been arrayed were arrayed facing two within the circle. He suspected that this ritual had gotten entirely out of hand, and the masks were shiny resin-made imitations of the centipede's face. The eyes made blind. The mouths covered, the inside of the mask seemed to have had a bit. The women's rictus grins stretched to show where they had clenched down hard and teeth shattered at the base. He became concerned as to the fact that the girl who was back on the first floor did not seem to have been involved. If these types of things spill over, it can lead to pure chaos, seeping into the ground. And these trappings were pathetic. Wards and spells meant to conceal incomplete. The women seemed to have rushed. Perhaps the other had failed to join the circle in time. Aziz had taken off his helmet and had begun muttering something of an incantation under his breath. The wizard took note and was about to chide the boy for uttering heard and captured spell words blind, but then paused, hearing naught but prayers to Ishtar over these women. That was fine. Likely needed. Ill, regardless of what else was discovered behind the third of these doors and floors above. The mess of tonight would not matter, as this place would have to be razed to the ground. They had no less than 5 more problems to deal with. Possibly more. Likely more, as Khanzel was beginning to suspect a third body of 3 witches was atop the pile of which this had all become. An infected boil of a Han. Tani pointed to notes left on a desk in the nearest corner to the door, soon taken and put to Tani's belt satchel. If each body held within it 2 worms of this evil, then the numbers were not in their favor. The clothing and look of distress upon the first body perhaps indicating that she had been roped into this, or otherwise not been party to the ritual. Her face had been misshapen and cut of horror. The horror on the face of the 2 masked cultists were of vile euphoria, wide-eyed grinning things with no sense of what had chewed its way out from within them. The wizard curled his nose in disgust, hoping that perhaps it was an out-of-body experience. These women had perhaps been pretty some time ago, but ruin was upon them before, showing signs of scratches and cuts in accordance with other cult rituals and flesh sacrifices. All of them had scarring known to those who have had to cut a child from the mother. His eyes narrowed. Now this was beginning to make sense. Taken horrible form in a map of process in the mind of the wizard. The multi-segmented thing that had greeted them, major domo of the house, it would seem, attended to the 3rd floor and had not attacked. So other work was at play, and Khanzel began to fear this place, the housing of some clandestine vanguard. He straightened, grumbled, and Aziz was already helmed. The wizard took a small tip from a flask in the shape of a jinn's horn and offered it to Aziz, who declined politely, then Tani, who took a quick sniff of the stuff followed by a swig. Had some kick, brought his awareness to the forefront before it would slump back for a while. But they didn't seem to have much more business past this ruin in the forthcoming report. Tucking the flask under his robe, the wizard spat to the corner and drew a long, mean-looking dagger as long as Aziz's forearm from his cloak. And the boys followed him up the stairs, upon their footsteps making the ascent. They heard the very threatening sound of something they fear was large, insect-like wings, beating with unnatural, deep, resonating tones to match unnatural size. The wizard flared his pipe, eyeing the tiny ivory demon, who looked ready for a fight, eyes glowing orange for a spell. The wizard looked up into the murk above and resumed the ascent.